Yes, hello once again. Welcome back to Classic Dirt Bike TV, where we have another example of one of those old vintage twin shock machines for you to take a look at. Now, this particular bike here, although it hails from 1980, is far from original, because this particular bike here has been upgraded and had a few nice trick parts bolted onto it. So we're going to dive straight into that video now and take a look at Steve Denton's 1980 Honda CR250 Red Rocket. Now, I have to say that very few race bikes have had the impact in motocross that these Honda 250 Red Rockets have had when they were first introduced to the UK in the late 1970s. And prior to their introduction, many riders were still quite happy enough to race their European Maicos, Bultacos, Husqvarnas and Montesas. Although once these quite radical Japanese Red Devils started to show the European competition just how quick and competitive they actually were against the best that Europe had to offer, then there was almost a mass exodus of owners who just couldn't wait to sell, swap or even trade in their Maicos and Bultacos for one of these latest imports from Japan. So in that respect, it's pretty fair to say that at that time Europe had certainly never seen a bike quite like this, with all that red fiery engine colour scheme and the looks of a bike that could quite easily have been mistaken for the latest works motocrosser from the Honda factory. And so our featured bike here, although it's based on a 1980 model, isn't exactly what you would have bought if you'd visited a Honda dealership in that year, because this featured machine is a bit of a shop window into some of the bespoke parts and upgrades that are manufactured and sold by P.D.E Engineering from Llanrwst in North Wales here in the UK. Now, Phil Denton Engineering specialise in the supply and the manufacture of very high quality parts and other components for all manner of classic twin shock and even evolution motocross machines, and bolted onto our 1980 Red Rocket are just some of the very nice upgrades that they can supply. So our 1980 example here belongs to Steve Denton, and these pictures and video clips were all snapped just before Steve was going to race the bike at the 2023 Revival Scramble at Kendal in Cumbria. Now, as far as I'm aware, the bike's 1980 chassis has remained unaltered on this bike, so it's still basically the same 1980 frame from that year. But of course, this was the year that Honda changed from the single down tube on the chassis to this twin down tube configuration, because the engine also on this model was changed from the side exhaust port on the 79 bike to this centre port model for 1980. But as you're already aware, this was just a fantastic chassis for a motocross bike, because it was made of light tubular steel, very strong and flickable, so it was a perfect frame for a smaller 250 two-stroke engine. But as we turn our attention to the 250 engine that's fitted onto Steve Denton's Rocket, and on a normal stock 250 in 1980, this engine would have of course been covered in that lovely fire engine bright red paint, but as we said earlier, our Red Rocket is anything but original. Now, on the day that I grabbed these pictures and video clips, I was never actually told if there were any upgrades or fancy PDE parts fitted onto the inside of this engine, but I'd be very surprised if that wasn't the case, because looking here from the outside, you can certainly see that some of the parts certainly differ from the 1980 original. But the first, and certainly the most obvious, is this superbly crafted CNC machined alloy clutch cover, which on the original 1980 bike would have been just a one-piece unit, but the guys at P.D.E have made slight improvements to its design by making this into a two-piece unit, which now has a removable outer clutch cover plate, whereby you can now gain access to the clutch by simply removing the outer cover plate, as opposed to the 1980 design, when you needed to first remove the kickstart, then the gear shifter, and then of course the complete side casing. So as you can see, this is a vast improvement over the original design, but the engineering and machining on this part alone is just simply first class. And even this little alloy oil filler level plug has been designed as part of the new casing. And on this particular red rocket, the upgrades certainly don't end there, and on the ignition side of the motor, this has also had a replacement ignition cover, once again CNC machined from solid billet alloy, and this is a direct bolt-on replacement for the 1980 Honda original, but I'm not actually sure as to why the original Honda item has been replaced on this Honda motor, but it's all probably due to the availability of original parts for these rockets now that they're heading for about 43 years old. But as I said earlier, 1980 was the year that Honda switched from the previous 1979 side port exhaust engine to this new centre port motor, and that's why they also altered the single down tube of the 79 frame to this double twin spar design. Now, the carburettor on our Steve Denton bike is a flat slide key-in carb, which, as you know, wasn't the original part that was fitted on our 1980 bike back in the day. But then again, as I said, there are certainly a few trick and upgraded parts on our 250 red rocket, and none more so than this superbly crafted carbon fibre airbox, which is another new part that's a substitute for what would have been a basic plastic part in 1980. But again, as you can see, it's all been excellently crafted to fit into this 250 Honda red rocket chassis. But another nice little touch is this Phil Denton Engineering carbon fibre front sprocket guard, which again is super light and replaces what I'm sure was a steel item when these engines were shipped from the Honda factory. So the bike's exhaust expansion chamber is again a direct replacement for the stock pipe that was fitted to the bike in the 1980s, although I don't actually have a clue as to its manufacturer, but you can certainly see that it's very well engineered and will more than likely be every bit as good, or maybe even better, than that Honda original item. And once again, another of the very high quality parts that are fitted onto this Steve Denton twin shocker. Although in comparison, the bike's rear tailpipe, I'm pretty sure, is another Denton engineered product, manufactured in alloy, of course, with a nice carbon fibre outer casing there as well. And this part will more than likely be a big improvement over the 1980 red rocket original. But to hold all of these components together on our PDE Honda, I do know that Steve tends to use copious amounts of titanium fasteners when he builds these twin shock specials, which also adds more exotica to this kind of build, and probably a few grams less weight as well than the steel originals. But even in their stock standard trim, these Honda 250 red rocket motors were still very quick and highly competitive, even straight out of their packing crates, and that's before you even put a spanner on them and fit upgraded parts and other go quicker devices. But as I remember, I'm pretty sure it was about 35 or even 36 horsepower that these engines kicked out in 1980, which was pretty good for a 250 two-stroke, but it was because of the red rocket's initial successes on the racetrack that it wasn't too long before new manufacturers were springing up and supplying go faster upgrades for these already very quick Honda red rocket power plants. But even for the 1980s, this 250 two-stroke was just an absolute belter of a motocross engine. So as we move on to the front end of our Denton Honda, these top and bottom triple clamps aren't of course the 1980 Honda originals, but are again alloy CNC machined replacements, which as you can see are very high quality, just like all of the other upgrades on this machine. And again, those handlebar clamps are another Denton upgrade, machined from top quality alloy once again. So as you can no doubt gather, there's certainly not much of this featured red rocket that hasn't undergone some form of change or improvement, but all for the better of the bike, I'm sure. So when it came on to the front suspension on our Honda, I'm not actually sure if these were still the original forks that were fitted onto our bike, because I was never actually given that information on the day that I grabbed these pictures. But my guess is that if these are the stock 1980 forks, then they'll have more than likely undergone some kind of upscaling or improvements internally of some description, just like the rest of the bike. But again, even for 1980, these Honda forks were still pretty good, even straight from the factory. Now, as far as I'm led to believe, this front hub is a twin leading shoe type of stopper here on the front of our Honda, which I'm pretty sure wasn't what was actually fitted to these rockets in 1980. So this is probably just another upgrade by the PDE boys, which is more than likely been taken from a much later model Honda. And because this is a twin leading shoe brake, it'll have more than enough stopping power to slow up or even stop our 250. But at the back though, it's the original magnesium rear backplate that's bolted onto our bike with the original rear hub there as well. But that nicely crafted brake torque arm is yet another PDE supplied part, which replaces what probably would have been just a black coloured steel item back in 1980. But another nice touch here is this alloy chain guide on the top of the swing arm, just to help keep that rear drive chain from rubbing up against the shock springs when the rear of the bike is hopping around on the racetrack. Although while we are here at the back end, of the bike. It's probably best to mention that both the front and this rear wheel fitted to the bike are of course not the original polished alloy parts that came from the Honda factory in that year, because both of these wheels are gold anodized Tagasago XL alloy wheels, which have all been relaced onto the bike's hubs with brand new heavy duty spokes. Now, back in 1980 it would have been a pair of pretty basic shocks on the back of these red rockets when they were shipped from the factory, and down the years various makes and models of suspensions were changed by the riders as the technology progressed, and that scenario continues here with our Denton bike, which this time is fitted with a pair of top-of-the-range Race Tech piggyback units that are manufactured in Corona in California in the USA. And as suspension systems go for dirt bikes, road bikes and just about everything else that has wheels on it, Race Tech more or less make a suspension system for them. And there's not much that these guys don't know about vehicle suspension systems, because these parts are superbly made, and they certainly offer loads of scope for making adjustments to the rebound and damping. So again, another nice trick and quality pair of suspension units on the rear of our Denton Red Rocket. Now, if you owned one of these Hondas in 1980, it would have been a simple box section heavy steel type of swing arm that was bolted onto our Honda chassis in that year, but that of course would be of no use whatsoever on this new tricked up racer. So Steve has opted to go for another upgrade, and he's fitted this beautifully handcrafted alloy swing arm made by Carl Landrus, or KLP as he's often known as, Carl Landrus Products. Now, Carl Landrus was an American racer back in the day, and he was also very handy on a race bike, and he did achieve some very good successes while he was a rider, but nowadays he tends to specialise in this kind of swing arm alloy fabrications, and he even makes one-off specials for rare bikes as well. But not only does he fabricate these fantastic swing arms, he also specialises in alloy fuel tanks as well. So Carl's yet another very good contact to keep on your computer or phone if you need a special swing arm or fuel tank made for that rare bike that you're currently building. So as we move on to the bike's fuel cell, now although I was never told on the day of these pictures, I'm almost 100% certain that the fuel tank on our Denton Honda has been taken from a much smaller 125 model, because I think the original 1980 part would have been much bigger than this tank, and I think made of plastic as well. But this is probably all just been done to change the looks of the bike and to reduce its weight so that it could take to the track with just the minimum amount of fuel inside the tank. But this slightly smaller alloy fuel tank certainly does give a slimmer profile to the overall aesthetics of the bike, and in my opinion a much better look than the bulkier 1980 plastic unit. But I expect it's still big enough to hold enough gas to feed that 250 LC motor on even the longest of race motos. But when it comes to the bike's seat, I'm pretty sure that this is actually one of the very few parts that haven't been upgraded or changed on our Denton Racer, because this certainly looks like it's the same seat that would have been fixed onto our bike in 1980, but I expect that this again would have undergone some kind of small refurbishment with, at the very least, maybe a brand new seat cover fitted to the bike's original seat base and foam. But it certainly looks correct for 1980. But most of the plastics on our Honda Red Rocket are again replacement items, because I'm pretty sure that all of the 1980 factory originals are now long gone, and the chances are that these are reproduction parts, which is another reason that makes these older Red Rockets a very good choice if you're in the market for an old twin shock racer, because there are plenty outlets out there now for new old stock or substitute parts if you want to rebuild or maybe spruce up your aging Honda twin shocker. And so as we move onto the bike's pilot seat, now Steve's fitted modern controls to his Honda with Renthal handlebars, Rikon levers and other exotic cable adjusters and grips, and just in case there's some kind of problems with that Red Rocket engine and it needs to be shut down in a hurry, Steve's also fitted an engine kill switch as well, which of course didn't actually come with these bikes in 1980. But as I mentioned at the start of the video, you probably just couldn't get any further away from an original 1980 Red Rocket than this example here of Steve Denton's. But then it's not really meant to be a stock 1980 bike, because this is Steve's business, restoring, repairing and remanufacturing new and upgraded parts, not only for these Red Rockets but for other Japanese twin shockers and evolution bikes as well. And basically this bike is just a platform to showcase Steve's PDE Engineering wares, and as you can see, it's not just a shop window showpiece. This is a bike that is continually still being used on the racetrack. But as you can imagine, it's companies like PDE Engineering and a few others who keep these bikes out there on the racetrack with their restoration services and parts that would otherwise be unavailable, in which case we'd certainly see a lot fewer Honda Red Rockets and other Honda Evolution bikes still taking part in vintage twin shock or evolution events. And these four Honda twin shockers that you're looking at here are two 250s and two 480 Hondas that PDE Engineering built for the American twin shock racing team for the Vets MXDN at Farleigh Castle back in 2012. But these four bikes here weren't really bikes at all originally, but were just boxes of old rusty second-hand parts that were then shipped over from the USA, and then PDE Engineering worked their magic to build these four bikes for Chuck's son, Jeff Ward, Doug Dubach, and of course another American racing legend, Ryan Rhino Hughes. So these are just another example of what these guys can do with regards bringing these old Honda bikes back to life. Although I'm pretty sure that some of you Red Rocket enthusiasts out there might not share the enthusiasm for all of the upgraded parts on this bike and still think that original is still the best. But as with all of these older twin shockers, original examples are getting few and far between to find these days. But for me, the most important thing is that we keep them out there on the track, regardless if these bikes are original or not. Well, there you have it. I do hope you enjoyed having that walk around Steve Denton's 1980 Honda CR250 red rocket. As I said, you couldn't get any further away from an original bike if you tried with that particular example there of Steve's, but you still have to admit it's a fantastic looking piece of kit. Now, coming up next here on my CDB TV channel, we're going to take a look at a couple of very nice CCM bikes. And this first bike that we'll be taking a look at is a 1974 John Banks replica 500. And we'll also be taking a look at this 1977 500 CCM. And both of these bikes are of course supplied from the Rob Hughes classic CCM collection. So make sure that you retune to my channel to take a look at that fantastic pair of British built bikes. But from all of us here at Classic Dirt Bike TV, for the time being, it's goodbye for now.